We are talking about surrendering to principle, and we are talking about the third stage of the development of consciousness. So, I thought my notes were all ready. Here we go. So our title for today, we're talking about 2 points. Sorry, let me start over again. You're going to hear my voice. Karen and I have been very, very, very sick over the last couple of weeks, and our doctor has given us this fabulous diagnosis. We have baby cooties. So they don't have COVID. We don't have COVID. Thank goodness for all of that, but holy moly. So I apologize for my voice, and we're going to do the very best we can today. But I'm so happy to be with you. All right. Together We Rise 2.0 is our theme for the month, and today we're talking about surrendering to principle. It is the third stage of the development of consciousness. So we're going to go back just for a minute to last week's talk. The second stage of the development of consciousness, which is the by me stage, really has to do with choosing and directing, right? We learn how to choose and direct, that life is created by me. We discover that our attitude is everything. We discover that our thoughts and beliefs form our life experience. And we have to learn how to take responsibility pretty much for everything that's going on in our life. We have to find some way to take responsibility, because if we don't take responsibility for it, there's nothing we can do about it, even if we weren't the cause of it. And ultimately, spiritually, we discover that really God isn't out there, that there is an indwelling spiritual truth about us. As Chardin said, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And we discover that, and we begin to really cultivate this notion of the I am that I am. Oh, wait, I'm a part of this too. If life is omnipresent, if spirit, this thing we call God, is omnipresent, I can't be the great exception. It has to be here too. And so we begin to cultivate it and cultivate our experience about it. So when I first really began to cultivate this experience, many, many moons ago in Seattle, I worked for a man named Terry McBride. Some of you know him. We've had him as a speaker here. He had an extraordinary experience later in life about personal healing. But he was a New Thought metaphysician for many, many years. And he created a program called Everybody Wins. And this was at the time of cassettes. So that was a long time ago. This was at the time of cassettes, and we didn't have any devices. Nobody had smartphones. The Palm Pilot hadn't, and the BlackBerry hadn't even been invented yet. And everything was done by hand. So you got this notebook with these cassettes and little cards, and you would read these cards, these affirmations. I can do it. I can make this happen. You would write these affirmations out for 100 of them every day. It was a 30-day program, and it was really for entrepreneurs and salespeople to really discover that they could really, really manifest in their own lives. And that is classic stage 2 development of our spirituality, is we begin to learn how to put a stake in the ground, how to say, this, I am going to manifest this, and nothing's going to stand in my way, because by God, I can do it. And all the motivational posters that you've seen, that got really big in the 80s, and all of that motivational stuff, right? That is the beginning of our spiritual development. We begin to put a stake in the ground and say, I am for my life, and I am going to participate in it. It's a very powerful place. And as you learned last week, the portal into that is to take responsibility. I take responsibility for my attitudes, my thoughts, my beliefs, my words, my actions. I take responsibility for all of that. I have to take responsibility for my response to whatever's going on around me, right? And I have to take responsibility for the stories that I tell about how limited or unlimited I am. And it's really great. We learn how to be very specific. We learn how to create specific forms. I want that house, that job. I want that kind of life. I want to have this in my life because I deserve it. It's great. It's It's a fabulous place. And we actually have to start there. Development means you can't skip over stages, right? We may spend different amounts of time in different stages, but you can't skip over any stages. So that's critical to our spiritual development. But there comes a point in our spiritual growth that we begin to realize that all the people that we're reading, all the inspiration that we're hearing, all of the spiritual practices that we're practicing, all actually speak to something beyond that. They all actually speak to something that is larger. That there's actually something more going on than just me, myself, and I putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is what's going to happen for me, and from this I won't be moved. Something's more is going on. And the other thing that can happen is when we spend long periods of time in that stage, we spend a lot of time in that stage, many of us discover that we become exhausted. We become exhausted with, being that intentional all the time and feeling the weight of that responsibility. And that's the doorway now into this next stage of development. We move from the constant need to create specific form. We move from that to a place where we learn how to trust the process. Now, we're going to talk about the fact that we don't necessarily get rid of the specifics, but we move into a place where we trust the process. Now, I want to tell you a little story about Reverend Karen. You've heard this story before. I know she's shared it with you, and it's her story about coming into ministry. And she was considering either candidating for a community in California, or starting a community in the Bay Area. And she was kind of vacillating between these two things. I was working with her, mentoring about the idea of this new community, what that might look like, what she might do, those kinds of things. And a big breakthrough happened for her. And a particular mentor said to her in her life, if you let go of form, what is it that you want from your ministry? And without thinking about it, she said, I want to work full-time and thrive while doing it. Do you see how different that is than I want that community, I want that job, I want that person, I want that specific? She got a hold of an end result that was about her life and her lifestyle and her life experience and the quality of the experience. And she actually didn't know what it looked like, but she knew what it felt like. That was the beginning of a really powerful move into this stage 3. So we're going to take a look at this little map that we use all the time, that we've created here, of these stages of development. And you'll notice at the bottom where we started 2 weeks ago, to me, the bottom, I don't know whether it's your left or right, the red one, to me, right? We're basically unconscious and on autopilot, and we feel like a victim, and nothing ever works out, and we have all of our stories, blah, 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 blah. Right? And then stage 2 is, we begin to get a clue. We go through therapy, or we go through some, life experience, or we read a book, or we have some workshop that we go to that begins to awaken us to the fact that, no, we actually contribute to this, and we can make a difference. That's that whole by me stage. Now you'll notice that stage 3 is down again at the bottom, and that the portal is a downward slide. But this third stage is the through me stage, right? And this is where, with all the songs that we've sung so far, right, this is where we recognize that there is something larger going on. There's an urge of life that is pushing through us. There is something within us that is urging us in some direction, going some way into our own lives. And that we begin to recognize that that's beyond any specific thing we might think that we want to manifest. And it's also a recognition that as we read our spiritual inspiration, then we're not the ones who actually make anything happen anyway. Like, what? Doesn't my attitude count? Doesn't my thinking about it count? Doesn't my affirmations count? Well, yeah, they do. But they all count because they're all using universal laws and principles. We're engaged in a universal creative process. It's actually the principle that creates. It's actually the universal laws that have the power. We don't actually make the airplane fly, right? It is the use of the laws properly, the shaping of the wings, the thrust of the speed that actually lifts the airplane out of the air. Do you see? We're using the laws. We're not making the plane fly. It's actually the way the laws work that causes the plane to fly. If we had to make the plane fly, first of all, we'd have to pedal like hell, and we'd have to pick that plane up and try to figure out a way to get it in the air. We begin to get a glimmer of this. And this is the move into this next stage of our spiritual development, when we realize that not only are we using laws and principles, but we're moving into, let me rephrase that we can move into a greater trust of those principles. And we will actually find our lives working not only better, but easier. It isn't our power. It's not our willpower. It's not the power of positive thinking. It's not us making things happen. It's actually us utilizing the laws by paying attention to our thoughts, attitudes, beliefs, and words and actions. But we're utilizing a law that we can trust, that we can count on. So this through me is a recognition that these principles and laws are what support that urge of life that is moving us through us, as us into the world. So stage 3 is all about the development of trust and inspiration. It's all about the development of trust and opening to inspiration and intuition, to listening to the guidance, to listening to the urges and nudges, and trusting that when we step out, that things actually are working out for our good. So there are a number of ways that this looks. And the only way I know how to really show you what it looks like is to share with you what it looks like for me. Because we can also fool ourselves. So we want to be careful about that. So for me, one of the ways that it looks like when I am really allowing myself to be in that place of trust, to move into this stage 3 of the development of consciousness and spirituality, is when I find myself in situations where I'm not sure that I know what to do, and I remind myself, well, I may not know what to do, but there is something within me that is moving through me that does actually know what to do. And what is that? That's the larger intelligence of life. That's the intelligence of life that knows how to create anything. I mean, really, actually does in fact know how to make airplanes fly, and how to make babies grow, and how to make black holes, and how to have the space-time continuum work in some orderly, lawful manner, even though it looks completely chaotic, right? That's the intelligence, that's the omniscience that all the mystics have talked about, right? And that intelligence, if I'm a part of that, that intelligence is moving as me too, through me in this moment. So I practice this a lot when I find myself in a situation where I'm not sure, especially when I'm not sure what to say. If I'm in a difficult conversation, if I'm in a difficult meeting, if I'm in a coaching session and I'm thinking, I don't even always know what the answer is in my own life. How am I going to tell this person what they should be doing? I don't know. But there is something within me that does. And if I will open my mouth and close off the part of me that thinks it doesn't know, the truth is, wisdom flows through me. I'm guessing things like that happen for you too. That's what it means to begin to trust, to begin to allow the intelligence, that larger intelligence, not just our human intelligence, not just what we're able to figure out or understand, but that larger intelligence to move through us. Another place where I find where this really shows up for me is when I'm willing to let go of figuring out how it is going to happen. So this has been very much on my mind in the last, 5, 7, 8 years, when life has really changed in a lot of ways. Ministry has really changed in a lot of ways. I'm sure your business has really changed in a lot of ways. With the advent of all the technology and all the devices that we're walking around with, and all the opportunity to be with you online like this, right? What does it mean to be a spiritual community in the 21st century? How do we get there? Well, I know what it feels like. I know what that feels like. And when I can let go of the need of figuring out the plan, figuring out every step of the way, figuring out how to get there, all kinds of miraculous things have already started showing up. Not the least of which is that we were already hybridizing our classes before the pandemic, and we had to shift onto fully online. We'd already been doing some of it for 2 years. So we didn't have to start from square one. We got to start from maybe, if it was ABC, we got to start from maybe D, which, wasn't very far, but at least we had already begun to travel down the road. Do you see? But we didn't know what it was going to look like. And we didn't know all the pieces. We have to stop learning. We have to learn how to stop needing to figure out how. And finally, the third thing for me, when I feel like I'm really living in this place, this level of spiritual awareness, is that I have developed an enormous comfort with ambiguity and uncertainty. Shall I say those words again? Ambiguity and uncertainty. Now, I know half the people who are watching this have just either turned it off or run screaming from the room, because we want our spirituality to give us certainty. And we think, well, if I'm spiritually grounded, then I know what I know. Well, I may know spiritual truth, but I often don't have a clue as what it's going to look like in the unfolding process. And there's lots of ways in which something can unfold, right? And we try different things. Some of them work, some of them don't work. We continue to educate ourselves. We learn and grow. And then all of a sudden, there we are. We stand there and we think, wow, that worked out pretty good. But along the way, there was a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity. And as human beings, we don't like that. We want safety and security, and we want to know. Which is why, point 2, we spend so much time figuring out how it is going to happen. How is this going to happen? And if we can't imagine how it's going to happen, well, then we're not able to use the laws and rely on the principles, because we're not giving it the opportunity to do its work. So the comfort in knowing and trusting that ambiguity and uncertainty are part of the road, part of the path, kind of part of the fun. That's where exploration takes place. That's where possibilities live. That's where miracles happen. That's where the things come into being that are surprising to us, because we're not trying to squash everything into a deliberate set of plans and certainty and this and this and this and this. And because, of course, what happens when we do that, when one thing kind of doesn't work out, we tend to think the whole thing's not going to work out. And we either throw it all over, or we become despairing, or we just become angry and say it doesn't work. Or we say, well, I didn't do it right, so must be something wrong with me. So in this process, right, trusting this process, we begin to make friends with all of these things. Why? Because we know that there is something larger that we're trusting. We're trusting an infinite power, a universal principle that is as trustable as the law of gravity and the laws that create a plane to fly. Now, what's the portal into this? Oops, let's go back to our map. Maybe you can see it. I hope you can see it. The portal into this place of growing our trust is the portal of surrender. Now, I have to tell you that when I first started hearing the word surrender in New Thought, I was like, oh, no, that sounds too much like my old Catholic upbringing. I don't do surrender. I don't do obedience either. Because I was well into stage 2. I'm the captain of my ship. I'm the master of my soul. I'm making this happen. I'm making my life happen. Isn't that great? And that is great. It gives us an enormous amount of efficacy. And we have to go through that stage of development. I cannot say that often enough. It is necessary and important to take responsibility and to decide where you want to go. Surrender means I have to surrender my need for the getting there to be a certain way. Can I say that again? I have to surrender my need that getting there looks a certain way. Sometimes I even surrender the outer form. What I don't surrender is where I'm going. And this, I don't surrender my dreams. I don't surrender the outcome. I don't surrender the end result. What I do is I let it go of the how. My need to know. My need to figure it out. And this is why it's called trust the process. Now you'll notice that if you were in another spiritual community, or perhaps you had another even New Thought minister at giving this talk, they might be starting to use the word faith. I think the word faith has so much baggage to it. And faith is something we're constantly trying to prove to somebody else. I don't really care for that word. I think it has too much baggage. I really like the word trust. It's pretty clean. I either trust the universe or I don't. I either trust gravity or I don't. I either trust that the airplane is going to fly or I don't. Either trust that the universe has my back or I don't. It's really simple. It's not something I have to prove. It's not anybody else's business. I don't have to show anybody else my faith. It's about, am I willing to trust my human egoic need for certainty and trust in the certainty of the universal principle and the universal presence to develop trust. When we develop, we don't throw away the skills and talents we've learned in the stage before. We bring it with us, right? So I still need to take responsibility for whether I'm trusting or not. Do you see? I didn't throw away the fact that I have to take responsibility, but I now have to decide, am I taking responsibility for the fact that I am unwilling to be uncomfortable with ambiguity? That I'm unwilling to be uncomfortable with my human inability to figure out how? Am I taking responsibility and deciding that I will have an attitude of gratitude and trust that the universal principles operate for me just like they operate for everybody else? Am I willing to stake my claim on my belief in how the universe works? Do you see? We're not throwing out what we learned in our second stage of development. We're bringing it with us. We're simply applying it differently because we're now applying it in a deeper, more mature way. And we're being engaged with not just the indwelling presence, but we're now engaged with life as a whole, life in its entirety, including the laws and principles. So I spent a lot of time working with surrender because, as I told you, it's not my favorite word. It goes followed closely by the word obedience. And I remember many years ago being at a ministers' convention and somebody asking me, "What are you doing in Dallas? Why are you having a ministry in Dallas, given who you are and all that stuff? And what are you doing in Dallas?" And I heard these words come out of my mouth. Some of you have heard me say this. "I'm being obedient to my call." And I thought, okay, I have no idea what that means. What? I can't believe those words just came out of my mouth. And I had to go away and think about that. Like, what was I talking about? Well, I was being obedient at that moment and continue to be obedient to the fact that I have uncertainty and ambiguity about all the ways in which to do my ministry in a particular moment. But I am never uncertain about what my ministry looks and feels like. And that has shown up for me for however many years, 28, 30 years here at CSLDallas. Unequivocally, without question. And so, do you see? We're obedient to the end result. We're obedient to the fact that the law has to use us too as part of the demonstration. And we are surrendering our need to figure everything out. We're surrendering our need to know everything, to be certain about everything along the way. This develops trust. And I'm not talking about trust in other people, because they will let you down. And I'm not even talking about trust in yourself. I've certainly let myself down, haven't you? But I will tell you that the laws of mathematics have never let me down. When I use them properly, they work. Truthfully, the law of gravity and the law of aerodynamics have never let me down. I've flown all over the world my whole life. Do you see? And when I use the spiritual laws and principles, when I use them, they have never let me down. That's what I trust. I trust in the infinite power and presence. And I surrender to the principle and what it requires of me, not what I require of it. Do you see? I mean, I can rail at my stove and say, you shouldn't behave that way. I think medium should actually be high and low should actually be medium, and I don't like the way it works. But that's how my stove works. If I learn it, the stove in the cabin's super hot, right? So it burns everything. You just have to turn it down. Okay, so once you learn it, you turn it down. Well, it shouldn't be that way, but it is. That's how that particular stove works, right? So if we learn the laws and principles, they become utterly trustworthy. But my part, your part, I have to know that there's something larger that I'm counting on. I may not know, but there is something that does know. I have to stop trying to figure out the how, and I have to be comfortable. I have to become comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. I have to make friends with the not knowing of the path along the way. Spiritual growth does not provide certainty. It provides possibility. And what I trust is in those principles. We trust in the principles of creation. So I just want to talk for a brief minute about the mistakes we can make here in stage 3. The mistakes we make in stage 2 is that we just work too hard. We want everything, and we end up exhausting ourselves. Is basically the mistake that we can make there. But in stage 3, the mistakes that we make is the first one is that we let go of the what instead of the how. And we say, well, whatever spirit you want, I'll go that way. Do you see, when we say that, we're not surrendering the right thing. because the universe only wants for us what we want for us. And if we don't give it a certain direction, it's just going to keep creating whatever it is that we have in our subconscious mind. We have to actually give it a destination. It's the how that we surrender. We never surrender the what. Oh, we can change our minds. Yes, as long as we make sure it's a conscious change. We don't surrender the what. We surrender the how. One of the other mistake we make here is that we believe we will have faith when we know the steps of the path. But then we don't need to trust because now we've figured it out. And of course, if we've figured it out, we have no need for the universal law. And it says, great, you figured it out, go for it. A mistake that we make is when we say, I can't imagine how this is going to work out. You have to stop doing that. You don't need to imagine how it's going to work out. You only need to imagine being at the end result. Do you see the difference? It's a monumental difference. And we can make the mistake of succumbing to our fear and doubt. And then we talk ourselves out of trusting. Or we listen to other people talking us out of trusting. Or we inundate ourselves with fear and doubt from movies and books and TV and Facebook and whatever else it is. We inundate ourselves with fear and doubt, and that just becomes the way we look at the world. And it colors our own spiritual viewpoint. Stage 2, it seems to me, develops the head. Stage 3 develops the heart. Of course, when we get to stage 4, we'll see something about that. That's very, very important. And they build on each other. So one of the ways we might get a hold of the mistake that we make here in this particular stage is this. I heard this story years ago, and oh my God, I relate to it so much. It's just ridiculous. So all the flooding that's been happening everywhere, right? We had flooding up in New Hampshire when I was up there. And I mean, we've had flooding everywhere. And unfortunately, people have died because we've not been prepared for climate change. Good enough, that's changing. So all this flooding, right? And so in the flooding, a guy's house was starting to get flooded. And so he found himself on the roof. He'd managed to get out on the roof. And he started to pray to God. Okay, God, I am trusting that the universe is supporting me. I am trusting the process. I am trusting life. I'm like, I know that you are going to rescue me. And, some people were canoeing up the road, and the water's up to the second story, and they're canoeing. Hey, man, you want to come with us? We're picking up people. We still got room on the canoe. Oh, no. God will take care of me, he says. God will take care of me. Don't worry about it. Go rescue other people. Oh, okay. So the water keeps rising, and the water keeps rising, and the water keeps rising, and it's starting to be at the roof line, and they're starting to send out rescue speedboats. They're looking for the people that are still stuck, and the speedboat comes by. Come on, we'll come get you. We've come to you get. Oh no, God's going to save me. No, I'm good. I trust in God. And the speedboat drives away, and he's now on the chimney. He's now on top of the chimney because the roof has been covered with water, and he's standing on the chimney, and they're doing the last rescue efforts. The helicopters are coming down. They let down a rope and a rope ladder. Come on, we'll rescue you. No, I'm good. God will rescue me. It's fun. No, I'm good. I've been doing my prayer work. I am absolutely certain that God will rescue me. And they didn't know what to do, so they went and rescued the next guy that was on the roof. Sure enough, the water kept rising, and the next thing you know, the guy finds himself at the pearly gates. And he's standing at the pearly gates, and he says to St. Peter, wait, I trusted in God. What am I doing here? I trusted in God. And St. Peter said, look, we sent you a canoe, a boat, and a helicopter. What more did you want? I know ministers' jokes are all corny, can't be helped. But how many times have we done that? Well, I'm not sure that looks like it. I don't think that looks like it. Well, that doesn't look like part of the path. Well, that really doesn't look like part of it. Oh, no, I know how it's going to be. It's going to be this way. Do you see? We're just interfering. We're interfering in the process. So we need to learn in this stage what we're invited to learn. What we're deepening in is our trust in the process. We also are surrendering our human ego. It is our ego that needs certainty and that needs to know how it's going to be. We're allowing a greater transcendent reality, that mystery of love and life, to move through us, to lift us, to support us, and to create through us. Each and every one of us are in this developmental process. Nobody will ever be left behind. Our only job is to engage in the development. So if we find ourselves in the place where we're doubting, where we're trying to figure out, where we're not sure we're trusting, where we're fearful of the uncertainty, you can be sure that you are standing at the portal of the third stage of development. And you already know what to do. Surrender. Not the end result, but surrender the how. And surrender into that larger reality that is the spiritual truth of life itself. So let us close with the spiritual mind treatment. I invite you to go within with me now. How good it is to know that there is a power and a presence. There is the one life, the one infinite life that is in fact moving, living, and having its being in all of creation. And that life is pouring itself into life, through life, all the time. Every flower, every tree, as it begins to change the color of its leaves, all of creation is an expression of this life that is pouring itself through creation. And despite the chaos, there is an underlying order, a beauty, a joy, a peace, a presence that is palpable. And it is the very truth of life itself. That life is your life, and it's my life, and it's the life of all people and all beings everywhere. It is the same life. It is the one life. And this morning, we move into that place where we stand in confidence and trust that we too are a place where life is making itself known. That the love of life is pouring itself through us. The very urge of life is the urge of our hearts. And that there is that larger reality that is forever lifting us. It is seeking to become more through us. We are a window, a portal through which that light shines. Today we affirm that we allow it to shine brightly. And in surrendering any doubt or fear, we open that portal wider and wider. More love and light pour through. We are blessed. Those in our lives are blessed. Life itself is blessed. How good it is. How grateful it is to know that this is what's going on. And in that gratitude, we let it be. And so it is.